I'd like to take this time to introduce our lunch speaker, Dr. Ed Lu. Ed Lu is a 21st century Renaissance spaceman, if you will. He's a former NASA astronaut with 3 shuttle missions under his belt, including time as a resident of ISS. He also led the Advanced Projects Group at Google, who developed, as you might know, Google Earth, Google Maps, Street View, and the Power Meter. He's also an inventor, an author, cosmologist, statistical physicist, and astrophysicist with a PhD from Stanford University. And less than a month ago, he and his colleagues launched the B612 Foundation and the Sentinel Mission, aiming to conduct the first privately funded deep space missions. So here to talk more about the B612 Foundation, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ed Lu with his presentation, Rock On.
So, just want to, my goal today is to keep my actual remarks as brief as I can, show you a little movie of what we're trying to do, and open up as much of this as I can to question and answer, because that's always more interesting, especially over lunch. And first I did want to ask, who here has heard of the B612 Foundation? Okay, well, excellent. So that's good. And who here knows our history and how we got ourselves into this? Okay, all right, let me start with that. 10 years ago, a few of us astronauts, myself, John Grunsfeld, and Scott Horowitz, a few other folks, we all were looking at what we might do someday should we develop nuclear propulsion. And one of the things that we realized that was possible doing such a thing was to deflect asteroids. We were a little naive then. We hadn't really thought it through. Everyone was naive then. And so we held a little meeting at Johnson Space Center, 2002, I believe it was. What I actually did was a guy named Pete Hutt from the Institute for Advanced Study and I were talking about it. He goes, let's just hold a meeting and see if we can get people to show up for this meeting. So we called up people, anybody involved in the asteroid community, with this tremendous deal. Hey, we're holding a meeting on a Saturday. If you can pay your own way and pay for your own hotel, we'll provide coffee and donuts. And everyone showed up. We had a hit rate of something like, maybe one guy couldn't make, the lone guy who couldn't make it was Dave Morrison, who dialed in from Telecon the whole day, from wherever it was he was. What we realized is that it was possible to deflect an asteroid. We were completely off base on how easy it would be to do that. And we spent the next bunch of years looking at how you actually go about deflecting asteroids, the orbital mechanics of it, questions like attaching to it, trajectories getting there, all those things. And it became clear over the years that it is in fact possible to do, and that the key to it all was getting advance notice. If you don't know something's coming to hit you, or if you don't know where something is, by definition, there's nothing you can do. All along, our assumption had been that, well, that is so blatantly obvious, of course we're going to find all the asteroids out there, because if you don't know where they are, you can't do anything. Anybody here know Don Yeomans from JPL? Don's phrase is, the 3 rules of asteroids are find them early, and find them early. And he's absolutely right. So that was our going-in assumption. It's so obvious that we have to do that, somebody else will do that, right? In fact, there are ground surveys, ground-based surveys for asteroids out there, Space Guard survey. They're doing a great job at finding the very largest of asteroids. Anything larger than a kilometer was their goal. They found a lot of smaller ones, and over 15-year or so period, they found 90% of those that are 1 kilometer above is pretty much accepted. That pretty much cleans us out. There is no more human civilization that anything like what we know of. Below that, we're not so much worried about that, okay? Our contention was, well, we ought to be worried about that, you know, and somebody's going to do it because it just makes sense. Well, over the years, we pretty much came to the conclusion that, in fact, no, nobody was going to do it, in spite of the fact that if you ask anybody, what is the first thing you need to do in order to either fly manned missions there or to fly unmanned missions to asteroids to take advantage of whatever resources are there, or to simply know what's going on in our solar system, or to protect the Earth someday, everybody knows that what you have to do is find all these asteroids, and it was not going to happen. And so that took us to about 2011. So 10 years of banging our heads trying to figure out how to get deflection done when we realized the necessary first step was not going to get done. We were on step 2. Okay, and what we had done was shown that step 2 is eminently doable as long as you do step 1. Well, along the line over the last 10 years, as all of you know, been a lot of changes, right? The commercial world has been pushing into the domain of things that were only doable by large government programs. So SpaceX, large increases in computing and storage, huge increases in performance of detectors. And all of these things have changed what is possible for a commercial entity to do. Because one of the things that was known is that the best way to find and map all the asteroids in the inner solar system, those that cross Earth's orbit, is from space, from a vantage point not tied to the Earth, but orbiting around the sun, interior to the Earth. And we had reached the point where that kind of mission was actually something that could conceivably be done by a non-government entity. So that was just out there. We hadn't really thought too much about it. So one day, after I had left Google, my friends invited me to come back and give a talk. So they're called Tech Talks at Google, just up the road. So I went over there and I told this story like, yes, we think we can deflect asteroids. Here are all the asteroids in the solar system. We know we have mapped about 10,000 of the near-Earth asteroids. There's about 1 million larger than the one that hit Tunguska. We're not doing very well. Somebody's got to do this, blah, 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 blah. And some guy in the back raised his hand, and I'm trying to remember who it exactly was, but he raised his hand, and he asked a question that just stopped me in my tracks. He said, well, why don't you just do it? And I said, tell me more, And he goes, well, how much would this cost? I go, well, I don't know. I said, if you're going to put a spacecraft out there, a deep space mission, the way NASA does it, NASA put an estimate on it about $1 billion or so. But I was assuming that if you could do this by any way, the most efficient way possible, that you could bring that down by a factor of 3 or 4 or maybe even more. And I said, a few $100 million is my guess. He goes, well, why don't you just do it again? And I'm like, tell me more. And he said, well, as many of you may know, there's a lot of wealthy people at Google. Keep on clicking those ads, by the way. And he said, well, there's a museum up in San Francisco that I just gave money to. He goes, and it's the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And anybody here ever been to that museum? Great place. Interesting aside, my sister was the lead construction person on that. But so that was about 15 years ago when they built it. But they're building a new wing to the museum. It's not the whole museum is done. There's going to be a new wing. And the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art is raising money to build the new wing for $400 million. And this guy said, well, I donated to that. We're going to be successful. It's going to take us a few years. There's no question we're going to be successful. The people of San Francisco will raise this money. And he goes, do you know that at any given time in the United States, there's 50 to 100 projects of a few $100 million that are municipal civic projects, museums, performing arts centers, opera houses. He goes, that is not including the large privately built things like the universities do. Does anybody know how big Stanford's last fundraising campaign was? It just ended. $6 billion. Okay, and that was raised solely from their alumni. Okay, they raise about $1 billion a year just from their alumni. Okay, and so he goes. So we're talking about something that would be in fundraising world small, because you wouldn't even be considered big or ambitious. And I go, well, that's news to me. So we began to look into this, and sure enough, he was correct. There are 50 to 100 at any given time in the United States. That museum up there is one of them. And we began to talk to some of our friends who have been involved in some of these large fundraising projects. And in fact, we talked to some folks who have raised money for universities, far larger sums. They said, oh yeah, you guys are small, this is doable. Talked to a friend who had raised over $500 million for another museum in San Francisco. And he goes, oh, we sat down at lunch, and it was interesting, the difference in viewpoints. Because as we sat there at lunch, he said to me, he goes, "Can you really put a spacecraft, orbiting the sun, like a space telescope that would do that?" Like, yes, we can do that. And I said to him, "Can you really raise a few $100 million?" He goes, "Oh yeah, that's easy." So, and he says, "Don't reinvent the wheel. These things are doable." So we then decided, well, let's see if we can put together a team that can do this. And so the goal, what I knew that the people who could make this happen. And as all of you know, the way to really do something spectacular is to find not just people who are excellent, but the people who are the very, very best people in the world. And if you can put together a small team that's focused, where everyone is the best in the world at what they do, you can't be stopped. So my friend on the fundraising side said, well, put together the team. He goes, that's the number one thing you need to do. You need to convince people that you're credible. So we put together that team. And my pitch to them was, these are all people who have run very, very large space projects. And we're not we're talking something pushing the very, very edges of what's possible commercially. And I started with a question to all of them and said, if you could run a large mission like this, a deep space scientific mission in a perfect world, how would it be run? And when they would basically all say the same thing. You'd run it under commercial terms. If, in fact, it's not something where you are doing technology development, but where the technology is pretty much in hand, but the mission itself is very difficult, you can do that under commercial terms. And that means a fixed price contract, and that means not messing with the requirements, spending all of your time up front, making sure the requirements are understood and don't change. And then you can do these things very efficiently, right? Anybody here ever been involved in a large NASA project? Anybody here been on either end, the person changing the requirements or the person having to deal with it, right? That's what drives the cost and schedule. And we realized if we could, so what I told these folks is, okay, that's what you want to do. How would you like to do that? And the answer was, I would love to do that. I've been wanting to do that my whole career. I heard that from all of our folks, actually. So we put together a team. The team is folks that you may know. Scott Hubbard, he ran NASA Ames and was with, was the old Mars czar. Harold Reitzma, formerly Ball Aerospace. We have Tom Gavin, former Mission Assurance at JPL, and one of the guys responsible for Galileo and Cassini, and a number of other folks that we haven't released their names yet, but we will soon. So we have gone about this. We are building a team that's going to go out there, and we're going to raise the money like other capital campaigns. We're going to do this slightly. We're doing it as a philanthropy. And the reason for that is because if you have near-term profits that you can do, then you can do this as an investment. But what we are looking to doing is something similar to what large telescopes do. In fact, we are a large telescope. And the key here is large telescopes have historically been privately financed. Yerkes Observatory, Lick Observatory up the hill. Anybody ever been up to Lick Observatory? James Lick has buried it there. Actually, he was the person who funded it. Mount Palomar, the Keck Observatory, the Sloan Digital Sky Survey Telescope, privately funded. So we look at ourselves as being in the line of large telescopes, with the exception that we're orbiting the sun rather than being on a mountaintop. And cost-wise, we're actually in the ballpark of these large ones. Look at something like Keck. In today's dollars, it's very similar to the kind of thing that we're trying to raise. So our contention was that if the people of San Francisco can band together and build the wing of an art museum, then the people of the world ought to be able to band together and build a space telescope that could potentially someday change the course of humanity. And that's what we set out to do. So I want to show you a quick little movie that sort of shows what we're building. First off, anybody know why it's the B612 Foundation? Well, B612 is the home of the Little Prince. He lived on an asteroid called B612. That's where that came from. So we don't take ourselves too seriously. That's the Earth. That's what it's all about in the end. But to properly observe the Earth and to properly find the things that pass near the Earth, you want to be much further away. So here's the big picture. Stepping back from the Earth, and we'll step out to the whole solar system. Is it possible to turn these lights down here so that they're not shining on the screen? And so there's the Earth in this green orbit. There's the Sun, Mercury, thank you, Venus, the Earth, and there are all the orbits of the known asteroids. This is the asteroid belt. These are the near-Earth asteroids. They orbit in somewhat circular, some elliptical orbits, but these are the ones that cross Earth's orbits. There are about 10,000 of these known near-Earth asteroids that whose orbits have been tracked. And you see, the solar system is a crowded place, but remember that there are about 1 million asteroids that are larger than the one that hit Tunguska, which is about 40 meters across, which is really not that big, in this category. So what that really looks like is a lot more crowded. In fact, we're going to show you in a second what it looks like. We actually took the known distribution of asteroids and we plotted up what roughly 1 million asteroids looks like. And I'm not sure if this is going to show up well on the screen. Actually, it's not too bad, but that is really what it looks like. And those are all of the both potential targets for exploration, discovery, potentially resource uses, and the potential threats. And we should know about those. And again, we are going to try and build a space telescope to observe these. So a lot of data. One of the things that this mission could not have been done 20 years ago. It's simply an enormous amount of computing on board that needs to be done. So again, here's the Earth. And we are going to launch the Sentinel Space Telescope. Our current plan is 2017 for a launch date. We are going to do a gravity swing by of Venus. There goes Venus. So as you can see, this is a difficult mission. This is an infrared space telescope. We're going to enter solar orbit. Our final orbit will be slightly elliptical between 0.6 and 0.8 AU, therefore interior to the Earth's orbit. And from there, it can scan outwards, looking at the asteroids that cross Earth's orbit. It's going to scan Earth's orbit. So here it is. Here's the Earth on the other side. There it goes. And so there are times when it is on the same side of the Sun as the Earth, and sometimes it's on the other side. So its distance from Earth will vary between 30 and 170 million miles. For scale, the Hubble telescope, the Hubble Space Telescope is 350 miles from Earth, so we're about 500,000 times further. So a factor of 500,000 more. So obviously data rates are a huge issue, and that's why onboard computing is very, very important. So getting back to the telescope, it is a wide field infrared imager. And in infrared, this is what the infrared sky looks like. We switched to the data from WISE. This is all, again, with all the known asteroid orbits. It's interesting, all these are the real orbits of the known asteroids, and this is the WISE background sky from the Wide Field Infrared Spectrographic Explorer, I think it was. And in infrared, the asteroids stand out like sore thumbs because they're warmed by the sun when they are that close to the sun. Whereas in visible, this is very much more difficult to do because there are a lot of background sources, stars, that make it much harder to spot the dim asteroids. But in infrared, they really stand out. And so that's why we've gone to the infrared. So what we'll do is we'll scan the nighttime sky. We will be able to look away from the sun continuously, and as we rotate around the sun, scan half the sky continuously, including Earth's orbit. So here's the Earth going around the sun, and there is Sentinel going around the sun. So this is its field of view. You see, at this point, it can see the Earth, and there are times when it will swing away and be able to scan what is on the other side of the sun from the Earth because of the fact that it goes around the sun faster with the interior orbit. And within 5 years, we will have completed a survey of we'll have discovered about 500,000 asteroids. For scale, that means that in the first month, we'll have discovered and tracked more asteroids than have been discovered by all other telescopes throughout history combined. And we will continue that for 5.5 years. So we will completely dominate the discoveries of asteroids over the next 10 years or so. And that dynamic map, this moving map of all these asteroids, will be valid for approximately 100 years, meaning you'll be able to pin down the location of each of those asteroids, where it will be, for about the next 100 years, which means you know those that come near the Earth and those that are accessible because they come near the Earth at a relatively slow velocity, as well as those that might actually hit the Earth. And so that is our goal, moving back towards the Earth. This is what it's all about again, coming back to the Earth. And our project, we just announced publicly at the California Academy of Sciences just about a month ago. And we'll go back to our nice logo. And that is, you can bring the lights up now. That is the story of the B612 Foundation, how we went from 4 guys and a website to trying to do something very large. So, I thought I'd open this up to questions. Throw anything at me, I'll answer anything. Speak up when you answer the question. Or you know what, I'll use this.
My name is Dave Anhalt from Space Systems Laurel. Given that NASA has great interest in this as well, I have a personal friend, Lindley Johnson, that's been devoting his life to the discovery of NEO aspects. And NASA is so much forward-leaning on public-private partnerships. As you were assembling your business plan, why didn't you think in terms of a public-private partnership with NASA on something that's such an element of their core mission?
Well, we actually did. Because one of the things that we didn't want to do was rebuild facilities that already exist. So we went to NASA and said, hey, this is what we'd like to build. We don't want to build a deep space network because we do need to do tracking and we do need to do comm. And you guys have one. Might you be interested in providing the tracking, communications, and so on, and even some other things, because if you would like insight into how a mission like this could be done under commercial terms, then maybe we could strike a Space Act agreement, which we have signed. So NASA, in fact, will be providing DSN time. We are going to use approximately an hour and a half a week. They'll be providing tracking. And in addition to that, because they want insight into how the program is being developed, some NASA engineers and scientists will be allowed to sit on our review boards. The review board, in particular, run by Tom Gavin, will have some NASA experts on it. They will be able to provide, NASA would like to see that insight. In addition to that, NASA saw this as an opportunity because we'll have an unprecedented astronomical data set. And so they said, well, one of the things that we could do is stand up a science team, such as we do for other missions. And we said that would be fantastic. We think this data set should be put to full use. And so it is a no-cost Space Act agreement. That means we are paying for everything on our end, and they're using their existing facilities. So we have not asked for any money, and that really smooths the wheels when we're working with NASA. And so...
They will be investing in time and talent to man the...
Yes, but I would say they're getting a considerable bargain because they're getting a data set that would have cost them $1 billion for a lot less. Maybe over here? Yeah. Well, we stick you, and then we had one back here someplace. Okay.
Great concept, really exciting. I was just curious, you mentioned your fundraising sources that are used to doing this in their sleep. Primarily wanted to hear about a crack team that could do it. That was their #1 requirement, best team you could find. What were the other concerns or hurdles or litmus tests that they looked for to convince themselves they should go ahead and raise the funds?
Primarily, it was that. It was, can you really do this? And I think we've convinced folks that, yes, it is doable. The folks involved and the people involved and the design as it is, which we have a preliminary design, meaning we have a proposal, a firm fixed price proposal in hand right now, and it is being evaluated and contract negotiations are ongoing. So I think the people who have the experience are involved in this, and I think that was their primary requirement. So how about over here and then back there?
Hi, my name is Ning Reidenauer. I'm representing myself. I just noticed that when it orbit around, it cross paths with Venus every once in a while with different period. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to include Venus observation in it also? And another question is, how long does it cryogenic last?
It is not really optimized for observing Venus. So that is not the plan. In fact, it doesn't actually, after the first pass, after the first gravitational swing by, it won't really approach Venus very closely again after that. Regarding cryogenics, there are no cryogenics on board. It is cooled via baffles. If you look at the design, it's based on the Kepler spacecraft design, the baffling system. In fact, the bus is very, very similar to Kepler. Using that, we will be able to get the detectors down to about 60 degrees Kelvin. And then we are going to use cryocoolers to drop that from there to about 40 degrees Kelvin. So the only expendable on board is maneuvering fuel. And I think back here was the next one, and then over here.
Two questions. First of all, what do you plan to do with the data, and are you going to make it available to the public or on a subscription basis? And secondly, how much money have you raised so far?
Okay, the data. We are going to use the existing data pipelines for asteroid observations. And what that means is when observatories spot asteroids, they provide to the Minor Planet Center, which is at Cambridge, these things, and they're called tracklets, and those are pieced together to form orbits at the minor planets. We didn't want, again, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So the data will become open in that sense. We are working with them to make sure that they can handle the flood of data, because we will discover about a factor of 100 more than all other observatories combined. So their input rate is about to open up, and we have to make sure that they can deal with that. Regarding the funding, our individual donors, we leave it up to them as to whether or not they want their names out there, as well as any amounts of what they donate. That is a personal matter of our donors, and we're not going to release it. We want that to be their choice. We are in the middle of standing up a fundraising campaign, and we have listed some of our founders publicly, the ones who have given us the okay, and you can find those on our website. There are some well-known folks and some folks who are not as well-known but actually have considerable means. One of the interesting things that you should be aware of is that, again, going back to our friend who has raised $500 million for a museum, he says you should know ahead of time. He's run 3 campaigns of that size. And he said, in the end, the people that you think will be the ones who are for sure going to donate may or may not be. And where you will end up getting the money from is from people who you likely thought, oh, I had no idea that person was that interested in it. And it will be people that you didn't even know existed. And he goes, all fundraising campaigns go that way. So the fact that somebody is a big name doesn't mean that much necessarily. If you go back and look at, and we have done this, where other large fundraising campaigns, where they have gotten their money, often you've never heard of the people. There's a lot of people of means out there that simply aren't famous, yet they contribute through their philanthropy to society. And so don't be fooled by the names. There's people with quite a lot of means out there that do support these things. I'll put it that way. Where was I'm trying to remember who the next person was. Why don't I let you choose? That way I'll.
Can you talk a little bit about the architecture of data reduction and what functions you're performing on the spacecraft versus what you're shipping back? And are you taking like a full star catalog on board, things like that?
Yeah, we do have a full star catalog on board, and what we are actually going to do is we're going to do an image, or repeat that same spot of the sky an hour later, and then later, well, this is either a day or two later that this is still being optimized. Those 2 more images, and then again 26 days later. And what we are going to downlink is not the full sky, but those areas where the pixels have changed. So, i.e. the moving objects. Occasionally, we will download the whole sky, but mostly you don't need to do that because in the infrared, the things that change are really the moving objects. So only occasionally will we send down the full image. And we have a set of astrometric stars, a catalog that we will use for the reference positions. And that onboard computing is something that is, the increases in onboard computing capability is something that allowed this mission to happen.
So it's quite likely that you'll be the first to know about an impact threat.
Well, actually, no, because we're going to put
Minor Planet Center?
We're going to put the data out through the existing networks, okay? So the Minor Planet Center will do the orbit calculations, and then the folks at JPL and the folks in Italy who already do what's called the impact threat calculations will go ahead and do that. So that is our plan.
Two short questions. One is, didn't Congress ask NASA to find everything above 140 meters some years ago?
Yes.
And I think what the other...
Ask me if they provided any money.
and I think this is what the other person was really getting. Do you know, can you tell us what the total amount raised so far is?
No, I cannot tell you the total amount raised thus far because, again, we want to leave it up to our donors as to their prerogative of what they have committed. These are private individuals, and since we are not a a government program, we will leave it up to our individual donors to do that. We will do that as soon as we know because of the fact that the contract negotiations are ongoing. We will put something like that out. But the contract will not be finalized for some period of time because it's a commercial terms contract. Remember what I said. The key to doing a commercial contract is to know ahead of time, to do a lot more analysis up front that the as-built proposal does accomplish your mission objectives, okay? So our teams that are going through with a fine-tooth comb to ensure that the analysis of the performance analysis does meet our requirements for mapping asteroids is just beginning its work. And so but in the meantime, we are funding work. We are moving ahead with the detector development and so on. So we are funding things, but the major part of the contract will not be finalized for, probably a good part of a year or so. And until that happens, with an ongoing contract negotiation, you don't talk about the price publicly, which makes sense, correct? I can tell you it's in the few $100 million range, though. And we have enough to keep moving, and we have enough to fund the work as that we are doing now, working towards that.
It's battle stations. It's 2018, and you've identified, and the corroborating groups have identified 3 asteroids with a 5% plus probability of impact within X number of decades or years. Mm-hmm. Are the conversations you're having with your donors and your key team personnel also involving mitigation strategies? And are you kind of indicating that, look, should the worst happen, or in some cases the best happen, and we do identify what's coming, are these some of your donors and some of the conversations you're having extending to, all right, this is going to be deep pockets time, and this is going to be planetary scale initiative time?
Well, I actually believe that should we find a threat, and remember what will eventually happen is that the threat will get down to, you know, time, date, place, you know, here's where the impact is going to be. That's the level of prediction capability that we're going to have. Given that, the governments of the world will act. The governments of the world are not good at acting upon statistical threats off in the future that don't involve something in the next 2 to 4 years in my district. Yeah, but exactly. Yeah, or society as a whole, once they know that for sure that something's going to hit. And with decades of notice, there are multiple things that you could do. Kinetic impactors, gravitational attractors, or at the very large end, even a nuclear standoff explosion. But those are things that could be done. Yeah, first things first, step one, find them. Okay, and get yourself decades of notice. And I believe that, you know, maybe we'll become involved in it if should we find something, because we will have a team that has built up. But in the end, that is a government responsibility, I believe. I don't think it's a private responsibility then if to deflect an asteroid from the Earth. But you know, there will be likely to be private corporations involved. You know, just in the same way as private corporations built the Apollo, right, in the end. So that's not our current thing that we're stressing.
Technical question. What characteristics of the asteroids are you trying to capture and the orbit, and to what percentage of certainty?
The primary thing we are going to find is the orbit determination. And good enough to know whether or not something's going to hit the Earth, which means within a few thousand miles, accuracy at any given time out to the next century or so. The primary thing we will be able to measure is the asteroid's size. In using visible observations, there are huge uncertainties in the size of an asteroid because their albedo is low. The amount of visible light they reflect is very low, a couple %. But if you're off by, you know, it could be 4%, could be 8%, could be 2%. You know, you can be off by factors of many, which leads to factors of 10 being off in mass. However, when you're looking infrared, you're looking at the 1 minus the 4%, right? So 96% or something like that. In other words, our uncertainty in the size measurement will be quite low. So we will measure the size. So the two most important things are how big is it and where's it going? And that's what we'll find. And we'll provide an accurate enough orbit that you can do follow-on observations from other telescopes. We're not ideal for individual follow-on observations. You can use things like Hubble and you can use things like large ground-based telescopes for follow-on observations, but they have to know where to point. So they can only do that if we tell them where to point. Spin rates, possibility, yeah, because if there's variations, yes.
2 questions. One, regarding the, you're going to be using the infrared and et cetera. Is there some way, of being able to calculate based on distance from sun, time passing sun, et cetera, amount of heat coming off of something, what it's made of, basically, at some point? And number 2, are you doing any proprietary deals with companies like PRI or others as far as data sharing or things like
as
that?
far as, again, for spectroscopic things, which is really what you want to determine what's there, that's best done with a follow-on observation, provided you know where to point, right? So we'll provide the interesting things that people can point at. We are well aware of what PRI is doing. We support what they're doing. We don't have any kind of deal with them. Although you should know that for them to be successful, they're going to need somebody to put together a catalog like what we're doing.
Yeah, along the lines of the fundraising for civil projects you described, have you set your policy yet on naming rights? And if you're accepting corporate contributions, are you going to let your Sentinel telescope be named like stadiums often are for corporations?
We are considering that, and in fact, that's typical for a large telescope. You know, like the Keck, right? Well, it's the Keck Foundation. They get to call it the Keck Telescope. We are open to that sort of thing, corporate sponsorship, that sort of stuff. It's not something that you tend to do early. It's something that you tend to do late, which is also typical for spacecraft, right? They're often named after launch, right? So it's not something we really need to think about too much right now. And what was the second half of the question again? It was...
Oh, I just wanted to know, like is common with Stadia especially.
Oh, yeah.
Is it within the realm of possibility after launch it's going to be named after a corporation?
Within the realm of possibility. You know of one who would like to donate? We should talk. Yes, we are friends with the people at Google, let's put it that way.
Looking at the images you had up there, and this is, of course, the second time, the one where you show what the actual picture looks like is crazier than rush hour in New York City. And it looks like we're navigating through that blindly. So this becomes really scary. So this is really great. And then it's just wondering, you're looking in one direction off the spacecraft. Are you looking behind you to make sure you're not going to get hit from behind?
We are looking at, yes, it is. There is a lot of things out there in the solar system. The space is big, so. But we are looking primarily outwards because, again, what we are concerned with is those asteroids that cross Earth's orbit. And so we have positioned ourselves at 0.6 AU so we can look outwards and see 1 AU, right? So there's a trade-off, right? You don't want to get too, if you go in closer to the sun, then you have other thermal issues, and if you, but you also catch more of the orbits. But if you look at the actual eccentricity distribution of asteroids, you catch the vast majority. This was optimized for that, and then realizing that it was close to Venus, we realized we could save some propulsion and by doing the gravity swing by.
Yeah, maybe 3 questions, I guess, quickly. One is, how did the Ball Aerospace technical design evolve from, I believe, what was kind of mentioned in the 2010 report? You know, there was mention of the Ball Aerospace design, just technically beyond the requirements, kind of creep and removing some of that. What is the impact on this on NeoCam? And then thirdly, what is the impact of this on NASA attempting to get money for NEO processes and involvement in LSST, pan-stars, et cetera, you know, which could do maybe similar things, but will take longer periods of time, you know. This is duplicative or replicative. In some ways, they're both synergistic too, so maybe just address those 3 things.
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions here. First off, for folks who don't know what LSST, pan-stars, NeoCam is, I'll go down through this. LSST and pan-stars are 2 large telescopes on the ground. Pan-stars is one in Hawaii that is optimized for detecting asteroids. LSST is one that's optimized for doing other astronomy where they may also be able to do asteroid detection. We're supportive of those projects. In fact, the combination of Sentinel plus either of those 2 is much more effective because you have one thing off on the other side of the sun and one thing off on the Earth, which is great. NeoCam is a proposed mission for NASA to build an infrared telescope that is at a Lagrange point, i.e. locked to the Earth, which can never be as effective at mapping the full asteroids, but is likely cheaper, although it has to be run by NASA through the federal procurement process and so on, which will drive the price up by probably a factor of 2 or so over what we can do it at. That mission, as you know, was not approved and cannot apply even again for 3 more years. And it does have to face, by then, probably 30 or 40 other qualified proposals. And also realizing that it doesn't fit into the decadal surveys, they do have a huge challenge ahead of them. But you know, obviously, we want to see the data. So we think that what we're doing is the way to do it.
Looking at a little more creative fundraising aspect, you're talking about discovering, you know, a couple of orders of magnitude more asteroids than we regularly do. And traditionally, the discoverer of the asteroids at least gets kind of the first dibs at naming them. Have you looked at that aspect as a fundraising approach?
Yes, we have begun those discussions with the IAU. We've had, you know, this needs to go out to the full board and so on. They have been very receptive. The idea would be that folks, our donors, could get naming rights. However, their current processes and their current policies assume small numbers of new discoveries. I mean, we're going to flood them, right? We're going to do 20,000 a month, right? Right now, they're prepared to handle 5 a month, right? So there's a lot of work that's going to be done with them, but we've begun that process, and they are not opposed in principle to this, but we're going to have to work out the details. How do you handle this many namings? They're clearly not able to do that now because they vote on them individually. It's not going to work.
As you download these pictures and gather this data, will you or will JPL be putting it out and making it available to schools for use in classrooms?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the real opportunities we see out there is the opportunity to involve as many kids as possible in this, because the number of discoveries is going to amount, it's going to be in the hundreds per day, right? Makes it interesting from a citizen science or an education standpoint, as well as sort of the audaciousness of the mission. I mean, in the end, if you really think about what we're talking about doing, we're talking about, people on the third, the life on the third planet, figuring out a way to map what is going on in the solar system in which they live, and someday changing the configuration of the solar system ever so slightly to prevent the third planet from ever being struck by a large asteroid again. And that's the big picture of what we're trying to do through step 1. And I think that's something that is exciting. And it brings in all the things that kids love, right? Dinosaurs in space, right? So yes, we are already begun the discussions with a couple of different entities on partnering to reach as many kids as possible. So we already have agreements to move forward. It's unclear exactly what plans we want to do with the California Academy of Sciences and the Planetary Society, and we're looking for more. So, by the way, I should introduce Danica Remy here, who's our COO of the B612 Foundation, and Diane Murphy over there. If there are folks who want to talk about educational partnerships with us, please see Diane. And because we think that is critically important, not only from spreading the word to kids, which I think is critically important, but also, truthfully, from as providing another hook for our potential donors. Because everybody wants to support education, STEM education, right? And what's the best way to do that? My personal contention is that one of the best ways to promote STEM education is to give kids something to be excited about. It's from the inspiration end. And so, we see huge possibilities here.
Assuming an asteroid would be at about 1 AU, what's the smallest NEO you could see with this telescope, give or take a little?
The smallest NEO we can see depends upon how close it is approached Sentinel at closest approach.
Assume 1 AU.
One.
It's 0.4 AU from you.
Yeah, but remember that they're mostly in a slightly elliptical orbit, so they will, and if they cross Earth's orbit, at some point they go in closer. It's kind of like the optical ones. The optical ones, they see things as small as 5 meters, right? Or even smaller. So we can clearly outperform that. But they have to get very, very close. So there is no lower limit to the size, because it's a function of how close let me give you a rough figure. I think at 0.4 AU from the telescope, with good lighting, I believe we can see, I want to say it's around 5-10 meters, something like that. But I can get the exact numbers on that. We know the detector performance, we know the optics, light gathering capability, and because you know the temperature of an asteroid at that distance, that can all be worked out. If you really want to get back into that, I can get you a more exact answer on that. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. If I could ask all of you to do one thing, that would be to spread the word that something interesting is being hatched here in Silicon Valley that has the potential to change, literally, the course of history. And I think that's pretty cool. And what we really want, our message really is that we want the people of the Earth to consider this as stepping up to the plate and taking ownership of this mission. In the same way that that museum in San Francisco is owned by the people of San Francisco because they built it, this is something where the people of the world can take ownership of this mission and step up from becoming not really just passengers on Spaceship Earth, but the crew members on Spaceship Earth, where we are actively protecting our planet. So thank you very much.